The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, printed on cream cardstock with gold embossed lettering. Cassidy Marlowe had held it over her kitchen counter for a long moment before setting it down next to her coffee mug. 10-year reunion. Hartwell Secondary School, class of 2015. Saturday, June 14th. The Grandview Ballroom, Calgary. She almost didn't go. Her assistant, Priya, had been the one to convince her. "You've been working 16-hour days since February," Priya had said, sliding the invitation across the desk with 2 fingers like evidence. "Go. Eat something that isn't a desk salad. Talk to someone who doesn't want a quarterly report from you." Cassidy had laughed at that. She had a good laugh, deep, a little unexpected from someone her size. People always seemed surprised by it the first time they heard it. She went. She wore dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, and the kind of low heels that looked effortless because they'd cost $800. No jewelry except her watch, a slim, brushed gold Jaeger LeCoultre that had been a gift from the board when Northfield Capital closed its first fund. She kept her hair down. She didn't wear much makeup. She looked, by every reasonable measure, like someone who had done fine for herself without trying too hard. That was, as it turned out, the problem. The ballroom smelled like warm bread rolls and open-bar optimism. Someone had hung a banner along the back wall, class of 2015, 10 years later, with a photo collage of yearbook pictures printed on glossy paper. Cassidy spotted herself near the bottom right corner. 15 years old, wearing a plaid flannel shirt, hair in a messy braid. She'd looked startled, like someone had taken the photo mid-sentence. She hadn't been popular exactly. Not unpopular either. She'd been the kind of person who existed at the edges of other people's social awareness. Smart enough to be useful during exam season, forgettable enough to be excluded from everything else. She'd spent most of high school in the library or in Mr. Okafor's economics elective, running hypothetical investment portfolios on a spreadsheet she'd built herself at 14. Nobody had cared about that then. She grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and scanned the room. Familiar faces, softened or sharpened by 10 years. Some had grown into themselves. Some hadn't. There was a cluster near the DJ booth that she vaguely recognized as the old rugby crowd. There was a table of women she remembered from yearbook committee, now deep in conversation, phones face up on the table. And then there was Derek Holt. She saw him before he saw her. Derek hadn't changed much. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe just broader. He'd clearly kept up with some kind of gym routine. His hair was styled in that aggressively deliberate way that took effort to make look effortless and failed. He was standing near the bar with a group of 3 other men, laughing at something with his head thrown back, one hand gesturing widely. Cassidy's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just for a second. Derek Holt, who had stood in front of her entire grade 11 economics class, and told Miss Okafor, in front of everyone, that Cassidy's 3-year investment simulation project was cute, but not how the real world works. Derek Holt, whose father owned a small chain of hardware stores in Red Deer, and who had spent 4 years of high school conducting himself, as though this fact was equivalent to a personal achievement. Derek Holt, who had once looked at her across a cafeteria table and said with genuine curiosity, "Do you actually think you're going to work in finance? Like actually?" She'd said yes. He'd laughed. Not meanly exactly, just the way someone laughs when they think something is sweetly, harmlessly wrong. She had thought about that laugh more times than she'd ever admitted to anyone. She turned toward the appetizer table. She was here to have a normal evening and eat something that wasn't a desk salad. She was not here to revisit 2013. "Cassidy?" She turned. It wasn't Derek. It was Sandra Ip, yearbook committee, now apparently working in Vancouver in communications, based on the lanyard still somehow around her neck from an afternoon flight. Sandra pulled her into a hug with the warmth of someone who had genuinely fond memories, and Cassidy felt herself relax a few degrees. They talked for 20 minutes. It was easy, pleasant. Sandra had 2 kids and a lab mix named after a Canadian prime minister. Cassidy told her she'd been in Calgary for 6 years, that she worked in finance, venture and private equity mostly. And Sandra nodded with the polite enthusiasm of someone who didn't need the details to be glad things had gone well. It was during this conversation that Derek found her. Marlowe. He said her last name the way he always had, like he was reading it off a list. Cassidy turned around. Derek Holt stood 2 feet away with a glass of something amber in his hand and a smile that hadn't changed at all in 10 years. Beside him was a woman, young, early 20s, wearing a dress that caught the light, who was introduced almost as an afterthought as Tiffany. "Wow," Derek said, scanning her in that way men sometimes did when they thought they were being subtle. "You look exactly the same." "So do you," Cassidy said. It was true and not entirely a compliment. "You come from Calgary?" he asked. "I live here." "Yeah, right, he nodded. "So what are you up to these days?" "You went into, wasn't it accounting?" she said. "Venture capital." "Oh," he processed this. "So like you work at one of those firms? As an analyst or?" "I run one," Cassidy said. A small silence. "You run one," Derek repeated. Northfield Capital, we're based here in Calgary with a satellite office in Toronto. She kept her voice easy, conversational, the way she'd learned to be in rooms where she was the only woman under 50. We focus on early-stage tech and clean energy. Fourth fund closes in September. Derek blinked. Huh. Sandra beside her had gone very still in the way people go still when they realize they're watching something interesting happen. That's good. Derek recovered quickly. He'd always been quick. So you're managing like what, a team of analysts? I have 43 people across both offices. Another pause. 43, he said. Wow. He took a sip of his drink. I mean, that's great. That's really great for you. For you, two small words. She'd heard them her entire life and had never once managed to explain why they landed the way they did. Like a hand on the shoulder from someone who didn't quite believe you'd gotten this far on your own. Thanks, she said. I'm VP of Business Development now, Derek offered, and there was something in the way he said it, a little too quickly, a little too loud, that told her everything. At Meridian Group. You know them, Industrial Consulting Western Canada? We're doing pretty well, actually. Last year was our best. I know Meridian, Cassidy said. We looked at them for a potential acquisition last spring. Derek's mouth paused mid-sentence. Decided it wasn't the right fit, she added pleasantly. Tiffany shifted her weight from one heel to the other. An acquisition, Derek said slowly. It didn't go anywhere. These things usually don't. She shrugged. The sector was interesting, but the margins weren't where we needed them. He stared at her. She could see him recalibrating, the mental arithmetic of a man trying to reconcile the girl he remembered with the person standing in front of him. Well, he said finally, I mean, good for you. Honestly, I always knew you were going to do something. He said it with the tone of someone bestowing a blessing retroactively. Did you? Cassidy asked. Sure, I mean, he laughed a little. You were always, very determined. Very heads down. You told me I'd never actually work in finance. A beat. I said that? Grade 11 economics. November, in front of the whole class. She said it without heat. Factual, the way she'd learned to present numbers in a room full of men who were hoping she'd made a mistake. You said my project was cute. Derek's jaw shifted. Tiffany was now looking at him with an expression that hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. I mean, I was 16, he said. Kids say stupid stuff. Sure, you're not still. I'm not anything, Cassidy said. I'm having a perfectly nice time. And she meant it. The exchange had taken perhaps 4 minutes, and she'd spent 10 years quietly building the answer. She didn't need to be angry. The math had already done that work for her. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Look, I just think it's impressive, okay? Genuinely, I think what you've done is really impressive. Thank you, Derek. I mean it, I know you do. She smiled at him. It was a real smile, the kind she used in boardrooms when she'd already won. It was good to see you. She turned back to Sandra, who was pressing her lips together very hard. Cassidy stepped outside 20 minutes later for some air. The evening was cool in the way only a Calgary June could manage. Still light at 9 o'clock, the sky a deep, improbable blue over the Bow River. She stood on the terrace with her water glass and let herself breathe. She heard the door open behind her. Cassidy Marlowe. This voice was different. Warmer. She turned. Miles Ashford had barely changed. Still lean. Still had that particular quality of stillness about him that she'd always associated with people who were genuinely comfortable inside their own heads. He was holding a club soda and wearing a jacket over a plain gray shirt, looking like he'd come from somewhere more interesting, and hadn't bothered to dress differently. She'd known Miles casually in high school. He'd been in her English class, 2 years ahead, quiet, brilliant in a way that made teachers slightly nervous. He'd left for Ontario for university and she'd lost track of him entirely. Miles, she genuinely smiled. I didn't know you were coming to this. My sister put my name down, he said, stepping up beside her at the railing. I didn't find out until Tuesday. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the river. Did you just come from that? He nodded toward the ballroom windows. Or have you been out here? Just needed a minute, she said. He glanced at her sideways. Derek Holt? She laughed before she could stop herself. Is it that obvious? He cornered me for 12 minutes about industrial consulting margins and then brought up his BMW. Miles sipped his soda. I don't know your history with him, but he seems like someone who peaked in a particular way. We had a moment in grade 11 economics, she said. He decided I didn't have what it took, and I started a venture capital firm. Miles was quiet for a moment. Northfield Capital, he said. Not a question. She looked at him. You know it? We've come across your firm a few times, he said. I'm at Brightpath Labs. We're a clean tech spin-off out of Waterloo. Battery storage, grid optimization. One of your analysts reached out to us about 8 months ago. Cassidy thought about this. Priya, she said. Yes, actually. We ended up going a different direction with our Series B, but it was a good conversation. He paused. I didn't make the connection to the name until just now. She turned to look at him more directly. What direction did you go? Lakeview Ventures, out of Toronto. It was the right call for where we were at the time. She nodded. Lakeview's good. James Park's good, he is. Miles looked at her with what she recognized as the rare expression of someone deciding to be direct. We're going to need to raise again. Probably Q1 next year. Different ask, different stage. Send Priya your deck, Cassidy said. Tell her I said to prioritize it. He held out his hand, she shook it. They stood outside a little longer, talking easily about clean energy infrastructure and the particular madness of fundraising cycles. And Cassidy noticed that Miles never once asked what it was like to be a woman running a fund, or how she'd managed it, or whether it was hard. He just talked to her the way she'd always wanted people to in these rooms. Like the work was the work and that was the whole point. Derek found her again an hour later. She'd been talking to a small group near the photo wall, a nurse named Amara who'd gone to UBC, a software architect named Tom who was based in Montreal, Sandra again, when she felt him approach from her left. She knew before she turned around. Some people had that quality, a particular kind of social gravity that announced itself in advance. He was alone now. Tiffany had gone to the bar, or had left, or was somewhere that was not here. His earlier bluster had quieted into something else. He was holding his glass with both hands, which she recognized as a tell. Hey, he said. Can I? Sure, she said, stepping slightly away from the group. They stood near the edge of the room by the windows. Outside, the river had gone silver in the fading light. I've been thinking about what you said, Derek started. About grade 11, no let me, he exhaled. I was an idiot, okay? I was a 16-year-old idiot who had zero self-awareness, and I said something dismissive and stupid and, he shook his head. I thought about that class a lot actually. Mr. Okafor talked to me after, did you know that? After your project. He told me I'd been unkind. Cassidy blinked. She hadn't known that. He said, Derek paused. He said, the young woman you just dismissed is going to spend the rest of her career proving people like you wrong. Try not to be one of those people. She was quiet. I don't know if it made me a better person, he said. I think I probably kept being an idiot for a while. But I thought about it. He looked at her, and for the first time all evening, his expression had dropped the performative quality she'd always associated with him. You were right to remember it. It was a shitty thing to say. Cassidy looked at him for a moment. The old anger was somewhere in her chest, she could feel it, the familiar small knot of it, but it had no heat left. It had been converted a long time ago into something much more useful. Okay, she said, that's it? What do you want me to say, Derek? He almost laughed. I don't know. That you forgive me, or you don't, or you're still angry, or… I'm not angry, she said. I haven't been angry in a long time, anger's expensive. She looked at him steadily. What you said in that class stayed with me because I let it, for longer than it deserved. And then I stopped letting it, and I built a company, and here we are. He was quiet. You should know, she added, that we're looking at a clean tech infrastructure deal right now. Battery storage, grid optimization, BrightPath Labs. You might want to read up on them. If Meridian has any exposure in that sector, it's worth paying attention. He stared at her. How do you just switch like that? Because the point was never to beat you, Derek. The point was always the work. She picked up her water glass. Good luck with the VP role. I mean that. She walked back toward Sandra and Amara before he could say anything else. Outside later, waiting for her car, Cassidy stood on the front steps of the Grandview Ballroom with her heels in her hand and her phone in her pocket. She could hear the music still going inside. Some early 2010 song that had been unavoidable once, now just a timestamp. Someone laughed loudly near the door. A couple were sharing a cigarette on the far corner of the steps, talking quietly. She was thinking, for some reason, about the spreadsheet she'd built at 14. It had lived on an old laptop her father had given her, a battered ThinkPad that took 3 minutes to boot. She'd tracked hypothetical portfolios, read everything she could find, stayed in at lunch to run numbers. Nobody had thought this was impressive. Her parents had thought it was nice, in the way parents think unusual hobbies are nice. Her teachers had been vaguely positive. Derek Holt had thought it was cute. She'd gone to the University of Calgary on a partial scholarship, graduated top of her program, spent 3 years at a Bay Street firm in Toronto before the pull of building something became stronger than the security of analyzing something. She'd come back to Calgary with 2 colleagues, $200,000 between them, and a thesis about early-stage clean energy that everyone said was either 5 years too early or 5 years too late. Northfield Capital had closed its first fund 4 years ago. They were now managing just over $400 million. The numbers weren't the point exactly, but they were the answer to a question that had been asked, carelessly, dismissively, in front of a classroom full of teenagers, a long time ago. Her car pulled up, a black Lexus SUV, quiet and unflashy because she'd never seen the point in the other kind. As she reached for the door handle, she heard footsteps behind her. Miss Marlowe? She turned. It was a young man she didn't recognize. Mid-20s, slightly nervous, a name tag still pinned to his lapel that read volunteer staff. He was holding her jacket, which she realized she'd left at the coat check. You left this inside, he said. The woman at the desk asked me to catch you, thank you. she said, surprised. He held it out, then hesitated. I'm sorry. I know this is weird, but are you actually Cassidy Marlowe from Northfield Capital? She took the jacket. I am. His face did something complicated. I'm applying to the CFA program in September. I've been reading everything I can. I read your piece in Canadian Business last year about capital and the energy transition. He shook his head slightly. I didn't expect to see you here. She looked at him for a moment. He was nervous and young and earnest, and he reminded her a little of the girl she'd been on that battered ThinkPad at 14. What's your name? She asked. Oliver, he said. Oliver Chen. She reached into her bag and took out a card, plain cream Northfield Capital in small sans serif font. Send me your resume and a paragraph about your energy transition thesis, she said. If it's thoughtful, I'll have someone talk to you. He took the card with both hands, the way people took things they didn't want to drop. Thank you, he said. Seriously, study the fundamentals, she said. Don't let anyone tell you the work isn't practical. And good luck with the CFA. She got into the car. Through the window as they pulled away, she could see the warm light spilling from the ballroom doors. Inside, the music was changing. Something slower now, the kind of song that encouraged people to feel nostalgic about years that had, for many of them, been much easier than they remembered. Cassidy leaned back against the seat. The city moved past the windows, familiar and fast. Her phone buzzed. A text from Priya. Deck from Brightpath Labs just came in. Flag from you? Cassidy smiled. Miles had been efficient. Yes, prioritize. Set up a call for next week. She put the phone down and looked out at Calgary. The downtown towers lit against the late evening sky, the river somewhere below, the dark spread of the foothills in the distance. She'd built something here. She was still building it. There was another fund to close, another portfolio to manage, another generation of people who needed someone to look at their work and say, without any qualification whatsoever, yes, this is real, this matters, keep going. She would not have been who she was without the years of being told otherwise. That was the part that was hardest to explain to people. The dismissals hadn't broken her, they had clarified her. She'd learned to build in the direction of her own quiet certainty, and that certainty had turned out to be worth more than anyone in a grade 11 economics class had thought to imagine. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. How was the reunion? Did you have fun? Cassidy thought about Derek genuinely, without cruelty. She thought about Sandra and her Prime Minister dog. She thought about Miles Ashford and a clean tech deal that might still be worth doing. She thought about Oliver Chen, holding a business card with both hands on the front steps of a ballroom. It was good, she wrote back. Better than expected. Home in 20. She turned the phone face down on the seat beside her and watched the city. In a ballroom across town, somewhere between the photo wall and the open bar, Tiffany had just pulled up Northfield Capital on her phone. She'd scrolled to the About page, found the founder's bio, read the numbers in the first paragraph, and then looked across the room at Derek with an expression he would think about for several days afterward. Derek, for his part, was standing at the bar holding his drink and doing a particular kind of mental arithmetic, one that had nothing to do with industrial consulting margins, and everything to do with a grade 11 economics class, a spreadsheet on a school desk, and the cost of a dismissal that had been so easy to make and so impossible it turned out to take back. He'd have to look up Brightpath Labs in the morning. He had a feeling that was going to matter.